There is a scene early in the Final Empire that I have read probably a dozen times, and every single time, I see something new in it. Vin is training with Marsh. They're on a balcony at Mansion Renew, the ash falling soft over the countryside the way it always does in the Final Empire, and Marsh asks her about the earring. The small, silver-plated bronze stud she never takes out, the one her mother gave her, the one she's been wearing since before she can remember. And Vin tells him the story, or rather, she tells him the story as Reen told it to her, because she has no memory of it herself. Her mother was unstable. She came home one night and killed Vin's infant sister. And then she took the pin she'd used to do it, and she put it through Vin's ear. Marsh listens. He doesn't say much, and then the scene moves on. When I first read that scene, I thought it was just backstory. Grim backstory, yes, the kind that tells you how broken this world is, how cheap life was in the Final Empire, how far Vin has come from that room where her brother found her. That's what I thought the scene was doing. I was wrong. That scene is not backstory. It is a map of the entire trilogy, embedded in a single quiet exchange between a Mistborn and a Steel Inquisitor on a balcony, 2 books before you understand what any of it means. Here's the thing nobody tells you about Vin's earring. Everything about it is intentional. Not just the hemorrhagy, though we'll get to that, but the design of it. The fact that Ruin used Vin's own mother, the fact that Kelsier told her to keep it, the fact that she almost took it out twice and didn't, the fact that it both empowered her and imprisoned her, the fact that it had to be removed by someone who loved her, in an act of will that cost him everything. Today, we're going to look at that earring. Really look at it. Not just as a plot device, but as a piece of architecture. Because when you see what Sanderson built into that small bronze stud, the manipulation, the sacrifice, the competing intentions of 2 gods, you will never read the first chapter of the Final Empire the same way again. This video covers all 3 books in the original Mistborn trilogy. There are full Hero of Ages spoilers here. If you haven't finished the trilogy, go finish it. Then come back. I'll be here. Let's start with the surface reading, because there is a surface reading, and it's not wrong, it's just incomplete. What most readers take away from the earring, by the end of the trilogy, is this. The earring was a hemorrhagic spike. Vin's mother killed her infant sister, a seeker, someone who could burn bronze and detect other allomancers, and use the bronze pin to pierce the baby's heart. That act of violence turned the pin into a hemorrhagic spike, charged with the sister's allomantic bronze. Then Vin's mother put it through Vin's ear, and Vin carried that spike for her entire life, which is why she could pierce copper clouds, which is why her bronze was twice as strong as any other Mistborn's, which is why Ruin could whisper to her. That's the explanation. That's what Sazed writes in the words of Founding. That's what Sanderson confirmed in his annotations. It's clean, it's mechanically coherent. The magic system works exactly the way it's supposed to work, and the plot payoff in Hero of Ages is satisfying. But here's what that explanation doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you who planned it. It doesn't tell you how long the plan had been running. It doesn't tell you how many times Vin almost escaped it, how many moments where she nearly took the earring out and everything would have been different, and why she never did. And it doesn't tell you about the other side. Because the story of Vin's earring isn't just the story of Ruin. It's the story of 2 shards moving through a human life simultaneously, working against each other through the same piece of metal. And that changes everything about what kind of story this is. Let me tell you what Ruin actually did. Not the version where he's a vague force of entropy getting what he wants. The specific, deliberate, almost frighteningly patient thing he did. Ruin had been imprisoned for 1,000 years, sealed at the Well of Ascension by Preservation's last act of sacrifice. During those 1,000 years, Ruin was not inactive. He could not act freely, but he could nudge. He could whisper to minds that were already fractured, already open to him. And he had been doing exactly that for centuries, looking for an opportunity. What he needed was someone with enough allomantic power to find the well, and enough emotional vulnerability to release the power into the world rather than using it themselves. That's a very specific kind of person. A Mistborn? One of the rarest things in the Final Empire, with exceptional bronze ability and a deep, unresolved wound where their sense of agency should be. Someone who had spent their life being controlled. Someone who, when offered the chance to finally take something for themselves, might feel so much guilt about wanting it that they would give it away instead. Ruin looked across Scadrial and found Vin's family. The exact mechanics of what happened next are laid out in Hero of Ages, in Sazed's writings. Vin's mother was schizophrenic. That fractured mind made her susceptible to Ruin's influence. He could speak to her more clearly than he could to most people, and he manipulated her. He made her love her first daughter, the unnamed infant, in the way she already did, and he made her turn against Vin. Made her see the baby Vin as something monstrous, something that had to be controlled. Then he steered her toward a specific act of violence. Not just any violence, he needed her to use a bronze pin, to drive it through the heart of a child who was a seeker, to create a hemalurgic spike charged with allomantic bronze, and then to put that spike through the ear of the daughter she loved. Vin's mother did not know she was doing hemalurgy. She did not know what a hemalurgic spike was. She was a ska woman with a broken mind in a world where that kind of knowledge was not exactly freely available. She thought, insofar as she thought anything coherent, that she was protecting Vin, marking her as special. Reen came home and found her covered in blood, holding infant Vin in her lap, calling her a queen. Think about what this means. Ruin planned the creation of his weapon before Vin could speak. He didn't find Vin and decide to use her. He created the conditions for Vin to exist as a weapon, years in advance, using a woman who never had a chance to resist him. This is a god-level long game, and it was just getting started. Here is where the details get interesting, because the earring doesn't just sit passively in Vin's ear for the first 2 books. It is an active presence in her life in ways that are easy to miss on a first read. The first thing it does is make her exceptional. An enhanced bronze, a hemalurgically doubled bronze, means Vin can sense allomancers through copper clouds. No other Mistborn in the Final Empire could do this. It's why Kelsier's crew thought she was extraordinary. It's why she could detect the army outside Luthadel in the Well of Ascension. It's why she eventually locates the well itself. Every tactical advantage her bronze gives her, every moment where her ability to see through a copper cloud changes the shape of a fight, that's the earring, that's her dead sister. That's Ruin, investing in his future. The second thing it does is give Ruin a channel. A hemalurgic spike creates a gap in the spirit web, a crack in the self, and through that crack, a shard can speak. Ruin could not hear Vin's thoughts, that's confirmed in the books and in words of Brandon, but he could put thoughts into her. He could whisper through the earring, and the voice he chose to use was Reen's. This is the detail that hit me hardest on my second read. The voice in Vin's head, the voice of her dead brother, harsh and protective and relentless, telling her to trust no one, to survive at any cost, to never believe anyone who says they care about you. That voice is Ruin. It is Ruin, speaking in the accent of her trauma, using the one person Vin would never completely dismiss. He knew she'd always listen to Reen. He knew she'd second-guess everyone around her if Reen told her to. And that paranoia, that inability to fully trust, nearly kept her isolated in exactly the way Ruin needed her to be. Alone, capable, and without roots. The third thing the earring does is prevent her from ascending. Because the earring doesn't just give Ruin influence over Vin, it actively blocks her connection to preservation. The mists are preservation, or rather, they're an expression of preservation's power left behind when he diminished himself, and Vin is preservation's chosen successor. She has a connection to that power from the beginning. But every time she tries to draw on the mists, in the fight against Zane, in the dungeons, in a dozen smaller moments, she can't. The hemalurgic spike interferes. The earring is a leash. It enhances one set of powers while capping the most important ability she has. Ruin made sure that his weapon could never be turned against him, as long as the earring was in her ear. Here is where this story becomes something other than a straightforward tale of manipulation. Because Ruin wasn't the only one moving pieces. Preservation, diminished, barely conscious, reduced to a fragmentary presence that barely qualified as a shard anymore, was also acting, and his goal was the opposite of Ruin's. He didn't want Vin to release the power at the well. He wanted her to take it, to hold it, to become preservation and use that power to protect Scadrial. The problem was the earring. As long as it was in her ear, Ruin had access to her. As long as it was in her ear, Vin's connection to the mists was blocked. Preservation could get close to her sometimes. She absorbed mist as a child, in moments when she wasn't wearing the earring, and that absorption is actually confirmed in Sazed's writings as the source of her exceptional raw allomantic strength. But he could never reach her fully while the spike was in place. So Preservation tried to get the earring out, multiple times. According to Sazed's account in the Words of Founding, by the time Vin joined Kelsier's crew, Preservation had nearly gotten her to stop wearing it. She was old enough to be self-conscious about it. She was a thief in the underground, and a piece of obvious jewelry was a liability. She'd thought about taking it out. she'd been close, and then she met Kelsier. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is one of those moments where the lore has a specific shape that's easy to blur. Sanderson doesn't say Kelsier was consciously acting on preservation's behalf when he told Vin to keep the earring. He wasn't. Kelsier had no idea what the earring was. His reasoning was pragmatic and perfectly in character. Allomancers can't be affected by metals that pierce their skin, so enemies couldn't steel push or iron pull it away from her, making it useful as a hidden backup weapon. That's just Kelsier thinking tactically. It's a good reason. It makes complete sense. But Ruin needed that earring to stay in Vin's ear, and somehow, through a crew member who had no knowledge of hemorrhagy, through a conversation that was entirely about battlefield practicality, the earring stayed in. Ruin got exactly what he needed, and we are left with a question I find almost unbearable. Was that a coincidence? Or was Ruin already moving Kelsier that day without Kelsier knowing it? I don't think Sanderson answers that definitively, and I find that ambiguity more frightening than a clean answer would be. A god who can plan a murder across decades, who can use a grieving mother and a dead infant girl and a worldly thief's tactical instincts, all to keep one small piece of bronze in one girl's ear, is a god who is always already 3 steps ahead. I want to stop here for a second, because there's something about this that I need to say directly. I have read a lot of fantasy. I have read a lot of stories about gods and fate, and chosen ones and prophecy. And the version of fate that usually shows up in those stories is the benevolent kind. The kind where destiny is on your side, where being chosen means being protected. Vin's story is not that. Vin was chosen by 2 gods simultaneously, and both of them used her. Ruin used her as a tool to free himself from his prison. Preservation used her as his successor, his vessel, his way of keeping the world from ending, and neither of those choices had anything to do with what Vin wanted. Neither of them asked her. She was a child in her mother's lap when the decisions were made. I had to put the book down after the Hero of Ages revelation. Not immediately. It came in pieces, the way the biggest things usually do. I was in a chapter where Sazed was reading the words of Founding, working through what had actually happened, and I came to the part about the earring and Ruin's access to Vin's mind, and I went back. I went back to the first book, to that balcony scene with Marsh, to Vin's voice saying she hadn't touched me except to give me an earring. And I realized I'd been reading a horror story for 3 books and didn't know it. The horror isn't the magic. The horror is that Vin's entire life had been shaped, the trauma, the distrust, the isolation, the specific flavor of her brokenness, not randomly, not by impersonal circumstances, but by a god who needed her broken in exactly that way to serve his purpose. Every moment where she believed Reen's voice and pulled back from someone who loved her, every moment where her bronze senses warned her of an Allomancer through a copper cloud, and she felt capable and strong, all of it was Ruin's investment. Her power was his power. Her voice in her head was his voice. And then I thought, what does it mean that she still became herself anyway? Because here's what I want to argue, and this is the part of the video I've been working toward. The earring doesn't just explain a power quirk, it recontextualizes the entire arc of the trilogy. Once you understand what the earring is, Ruin's spike, Preservation's obstacle, the locus of a 3-book divine chess match, you realize that almost every major decision Vin makes is embedded in a structure she can't see. Take the Well of Ascension. Vin finds the well. She is the only person who could have found it, because she's the only Mistborn whose bronze was enhanced enough to pierce copper clouds and sense the pulse beneath Luthadel. She finds it, and she takes the power, and then she releases it into the world, setting Ruin free, because the words carved into the stone of the well told her to. And because a voice in her head, Reen's voice, Ruin's voice, told her not to trust her instincts, told her that selfishness was what destroyed people. Ruin engineered every part of that moment. He put the enhanced bronze in her ear so she could find the well. He whispered in Reen's voice for years to prime her to distrust her own desires. He carved the instructions into the walls in the language of the logbook, the very logbook she'd been reading, the one that had shaped her understanding of what heroism meant in this world. He didn't just manipulate the situation. He manipulated the interpretive framework she was using to evaluate the situation. And then there's the mist problem. You remember the mists starting to kill people in Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages. People going out, getting sick, dying. There's a lot of fear and grief about it. And Vin has a stronger reaction to the mist deaths than almost anyone else. She is angry at the mists, bitter, almost hateful. Brandon confirmed in an interview that this is partly because of the hemalurgic taint. Ruin's influence through the earring was coloring her emotional responses. He needed her to distrust preservation. He needed her to hesitate when the time came to ascend, and so the earring made her feel what he needed her to feel. Even her resentment of the mists was engineered. Here's the structural consequence of all of this. The earring means that Vin's greatest strength, her bronze, her ability to pierce copper clouds, her edge in almost every significant fight of the trilogy, is also her deepest vulnerability. The two things are inseparable. You cannot have the power without the crack in the self. You cannot have the enhanced sensing without the divine whispering. You cannot have the advantage without the leash. And when the earring finally comes out, the power shifts completely. The moment Marsh, an Inquisitor, a person who has spent most of the trilogy serving Ruin because he had no choice, tears the earring from Vin's ear, everything changes. She can suddenly draw on the mists. She burns through 13 Steel Inquisitors. She ascends to preservation. The earring's removal is the moment where Vin escapes the game, not by winning it, not by outmaneuvering Ruin, by having someone who loves her, who has been fighting Ruin's control with every neuron he has left, do the one thing that costs him everything. Marsh resisted, just long enough, just barely. That is a story about human will operating inside a divine trap, and the earring is the trap. Now I want to gesture towards something I am not going to fully unpack, because it belongs to a different video, or several different videos. The earring doesn't end with Vin. 300 years after the events of the original trilogy, there is a man named Waxilium Ladrian who wears an earring. He's Pathian. The religion of the Path teaches its adherents to pierce their ear with a small metal stud as a way of praying to Harmony, of opening a line of communication to the god that Sazed became after the final empire collapsed, and it works. Harmony can hear the thoughts of those who wear the earrings. He can speak back. The earring is a hemalurgic spike, confirmed by words of Brandon, and Harmony uses the same divine communication channel that Ruin once used through Vin's earring, but now with a different shard behind it, with different intentions. Think about that for a moment. The magic that Ruin used to corrupt and control has been transformed into a sacrament. The same physics, the same metaphysics, the same crack in the spirit web. Now it's how you pray. Sazed took the darkest tool Ruin had and made it a bridge. But here's what I find genuinely unresolved, and what I think the later Mistborn books are circling. Harmony is a combination of Ruin and preservation. He is both, and he is, by his own admission, struggling to act, struggling to intervene. The two opposing intents are pulling at him and making it hard to do anything decisive, and there is something in that struggle that rhymes with Vin's story in a way I can't quite articulate. A person carrying two contradictory forces in the same body, held in place by the tension between them, acting, when they can act at all, through the smallest available openings. Vin's earring is a small available opening. It always was. The question the later books ask is, whose opening is it now? I'm not going to say more than that, because there are threads here that the later books are pulling on, threads that touch on what Harmony really is, what his plan for Scadrial actually looks like, and whether the Pathian earring is quite the benevolent sacrament it appears to be. That's a different video, maybe several different videos. But I want you to feel the question, because I think Sanderson wants you to feel it. Every time a Pathian prays through their earring, they are doing something that has a history. That history starts in a room where a broken woman killed an infant girl, and a god watched and was satisfied. Let me bring it home. Vin's earring is a small, silver-plated bronze stud. It is also the primary mechanism by which a shard imprisoned for 1,000 years planned his escape. It is also the thing that made Vin exceptional, the thing that made Kelsier notice her, the thing that made her able to find the Well of Ascension and fight through armies of Koloss and Sense, Allomancers through copper clouds. It is also the chain around her soul that prevented her from becoming what she was actually meant to be, until the very last possible moment. It is all of those things simultaneously. That's the architecture. And here is the rereading note, the thing I keep coming back to. The earring appears on the second page of the Final Empire, literally the second page. We're not even properly in Vin's story yet, and it's already there. Silver-plated bronze, a simple piece, the way Sanderson always introduces his detonations, as quietly as possible. There is a version of the Mistborn trilogy where you read it knowing what the earring is, where every scene on that balcony, every whispered voice in her head, Every moment where she almost trusted someone and then didn't. Every copper cloud she pierced when no one else could. You read all of it knowing that there was a plan, and that the plan was patient enough to wait for her to be born, to survive, to find her way into Kelsier's crew, to stand at the Well of Ascension. I find that version almost unbearable. I also find it completely earned. Because Sanderson doesn't use that architecture to erase Vin's agency. He uses it to put her agency in context. Everything she does, she still chooses. She chooses Elend. She chooses to believe in the crew. She chooses at the well based on what she understands. And what she understands has been shaped, but it hasn't been replaced. She is still herself, still Vin. The gods fought over her. One of them won. But Vin, small, silver-plated Vin, who grew up sleeping in alleyways, who heard her dead brother's voice in her head for years and didn't know it wasn't really him, Vin outlasted both of them. She became the thing Ruin thought he could use. She became the thing Preservation was dying to protect. She became herself, in a world that was trying very hard to make her into something else. That is what Sanderson built into a piece of jewelry. Every time I reread this trilogy, the earring is what I notice first. Not the magic, not the politics, not even Kelsier. Though we'll get to Kelsier, we are absolutely going to get to Kelsier in a future video. It's that small bronze stud. It's the thing I missed the first time. It's the thing that once you see it, you can never unsee. That's what I love most about the Cosmere. The detail that changes everything is almost always the detail you walked past on page 2. If you have thoughts on this, if you spotted something I missed, or if you think the wax earring thread goes somewhere I haven't considered, leave it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're new here, welcome. We go deep, stick around. This is the Cosmere Archive.